Hello, my name is Marcus, and today we're going to be turning this animation into this. Now to do that, we're going to be using a really dumb acronym I created, which is called FARTY. And so the first F is
Fast Action, Slow Reaction.
So here we have the animation in After Effects. There's just some simple layers, as you can see here. I just made it with shape layers, I made a wall, I made a ball. That rhymed, it wasn't intended, and some cracks that are just solids. So let's start by actually emphasizing the movement of the ball. So I'm going to press U to see these keyframes here. We actually already have some easing here. If we go into the graph editor, you can see it actually curves in, but we're going to make it very drastic. We're actually just going to take this all the way, and the last keyframe is going to just have a very thin spike. All the velocity is going to peak at the very end. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the scale. I'm going to make it peak at the very end, and I'm going to make it really slow in the beginning. So now we see, so already now we're starting to get somewhere, right? It's a little bit more of an impact. So we can emphasize this a little bit more. Like for example, when we reach this point, we want to go even faster actually. So we can basically keyframe these points here again and just take these keyframes and squeeze them closer to the impact keyframe. So we get this boom. We get this really nice speed up at the very end, which also emphasizes the perspective and how fast the ball is coming towards us. And now we want a slower reaction, but we want these impacting here to actually start fast and end slow. So let's select these 5 pieces of wall or cracks or whatever you want to call them. Press U to bring up the keyframes, and we're going to do the exact same thing as with the ball, but inverse. So let's select these last keyframes here. And we can either go into the graph editor and edit them manually, or we can use the shortcut Control-Shift-K. There we go. Set the speed to 0 and influence to 100. And if we look into the graph editor, you can see it does the exact same thing as before. It is easing out into speed 0. And we can do the exact same thing with the first keyframes, but inverted. So basically just Control-Shift-K and leave it as it is. And then it will take all the velocity and place it at the beginning. So it just becomes this huge exponential spike and easing out. So you can see what this does. It actually really slows down at the end. And maybe you do want them to keep moving even at the end. So you can just decrease the influence of these keyframes. So Control-Shift-K, maybe 50. So we still have some movement at the end. So it's still fast at the beginning. If you want to exaggerate the movement even more, you can find a place where they've moved quite a smidge or something like this. Make some keyframes and just move these keyframes closer to the impact. So see, now they're going to move more drastically at the beginning and slower at the end. So then we have the first part of farty, which is ridiculous. So the second part is
Anticipation.
That is basically suspense. You know the ball is going to hit, but you're building up the momentum and the suspense before the ball hits. So we can really emphasize this. We can actually make this beginning part longer so that we really get that sensation of it building up energy to hit the ground. So maybe we can move this a bit even more. You can even maybe move the ball a little bit before, something like this. So we have more time before the ball actually hits the ground. So let's just move the impact here so we still get that nice high impact boom. So see, already now we get this, we see the ball in the distance for a little bit longer. That's quite nice. We can maybe even make that it glows up, or it has a little bit of a star that is animating before it hits. Very cartoony, yes, but you can apply this principle to basically anything. So I'm going to select all these layers, and I'm just going to minimize them so we can see what we're doing. And we're going to create a new layer here. So maybe a star tool here. I'm going to create a little gorgeous star. Look at that gorgeous star. And this is a nice little shape layer, so we're going to call this Anticipation. There we go. We go down here and we delete the stroke. And now let's just use the fill here. We can even modify the star a bit. Let's zoom in. I just pressed a period. You can zoom in and out of your screen by pressing comma or period. That's really practical. And let's just make it completely white, or almost completely white, something like this. We can even bring the inner radius down a bit so it's a little bit more sharp around the edges, and maybe give it 4 prongs instead of 5, or points. And you see the anchor point is actually completely off. So I'm going to use this tool called Move Anchor Point. I can leave a link in the description. It's an awesome little tool. And see, now we can actually rotate it around. So I'm gonna press R and Shift S to bring up rotation and scale. So we're gonna make basically a little bit of a twinkle. So around here where the ball starts to appear, I'm gonna keyframe the scale, go back to the beginning and scale it again. These are both actually gonna be 0. And here in the middle, we're gonna have 100%. So it basically scales up and down like wheel. And we're gonna rotate as well. So click on the rotation and let's say we rotate 180, might be too little. And we want this to ease in. So on the last keyframe, I'm gonna select the rotation, 0, 100 influence, the beginning of the keyframe, Ctrl-Shift-K, just enter. So we just have this nice little shine here. And we can even increase the rotation. I can see it's actually not really enough. So let's see. We have this nice little shine here. And we can do the exact same thing with the scale. So in the middle one, we can say 0, 50, 0 and 50 in velocity and influence. Dimension X is basically speed, but it changes for scale. So we see like we have this nice little shine before it comes down to the sky. Maybe it's a little bit too large. We can actually decrease the size to like 60. So we get these nice little bling, and there we go. We can even play with the ball animation here, so press U to bring up the keyframes, and we're gonna move the keyframes for when the star actually stops shining. I'm gonna ensure that the ball starts at the same frame. Now, because we made these extra keyframes on the ball, it's gonna automatically change the influence of the first keyframes. So I'm gonna press Ctrl-Shift-K again, and as you can see, it is no longer 100, it is now 46. So I'm gonna change that to like 75, and same with the bottom one, 75. Just to get a little bit more of a slow start in the beginning, so we notice more how it hits at the end. And you can even play around with the scale. You can maybe scale it down even more so that it is more pronounced, that it's actually coming from very high on up. Alright, so the next letter in farty is the R, which is
reaction.
So we really have to underline the reaction of the impact to really emphasize how powerful this hit actually is. This is only a matter of creativity. So first of all, I'm actually going to create a little bit of a shockwave here, and even a highlight and stuff like that. So let's start by creating a new solid. And let's emphasize this bad boy. Let's make it quite bright, something like this. And let's place it right below the wall. Let's just call it a light. I'm going to press Q to select the mask tool, and I'm going to keep pressing Q until I get the sphere. There we go. I'm going to hold Control-Alt-Shift-In so it creates a circle from the middle. I'm going to go down here into mask, and I'm going to really brighten this up, something like this, or feather this out. We get this nice big soft glow here. I'm going to move this around to about here someplace, and I'm basically going to make sure that this comes on at the same point in time that the impact happens, so we get a little bit more of a boom. We see that light appear there, and we can even keyframe this, so maybe the mask expansion decreases over time. We just keyframe this bad boy all the way down, so we get a little bit more of an impact as it hits, boom. Next, we can maybe make a shockwave. Now that always makes a big difference. So I'm going to make another new layer here, new solid, and I'm going to call this shockwave. There we go. And you know what, let's make it quite bright because we want it to really be visually obvious. And I'm going to make it completely square, so 1080 times 1080. So we get this nice square here. So I'm just going to double click on the spherical mask because that way it actually makes a mask that fills out the entire frame. Now let's just animate this bad boy here. So here at the beginning, I'm going to keyframe mask expansion. Maybe make it 10 frames long, might be too much, but we can change that. Another keyframe and go back to the beginning and then just decrease the expansion until it is basically invisible, something like this. So we get this nice little emphasis here. Now let's do the exact same thing as before. Let's just make sure that the last keyframe has 0 speed, 100% influence, and the first keyframe has full velocity. So we get this nice boom. And now we duplicate this mask and just set it to subtract. and then we offset these keys by 1 or 2 frames. So we get this nice line here. As you can see, it's just this nice quick line. And we can maybe end the layer already here. I'm gonna press Alt-O. This is a custom shortcut. To create your own custom shortcuts, you can go up into keyboard shortcuts under Edit and just search for Trim. And if you go down here, you can see that I've modified mine to be trim in and trim out. So I would recommend that. So see, now we have the shockwave ending here, which is quite nice. You can even give it a little bit of a feather on the inside, so it's a little bit more of a soft shockwave. And let's move this bad boy down here someplace. Let's move it maybe below the wall. So when it hits, it's gonna trigger immediately, right on the impact here. We're gonna move this over here, maybe put it behind the ball, something like this. So when it hits, it actually creates this nice shockwave. Now we can even emphasize the shockwave even more by increasing its size so that it travels longer distance before it disappears. We can even make it a little bit faster, I think. So I'm just gonna squeeze in these keyframes and squeeze in the layer. So we get a little bit more of an impactful shockwave, something like this. Press Shift S and increase the scale again. I'm actually gonna make it go completely out of the frame. So we really get a fast shockwave like this. You really get that emphasis. Boom, a nice impact. Let's add a little bit more of a reaction here. So let's make a new layer. There we go. Null object. And we're gonna call this one Camera Shake. I'm gonna apply a slider controller because I want to be able to control this very easily. So slider, double click on this bad boy. I'm just gonna call this times. I'm gonna duplicate this and I'm gonna call this amount. I'm gonna press P for position on this layer. I'm gonna alt click on position and we're gonna write wiggle. Wiggle it, baby. I'm gonna pick whip all the way up to times. And I'm gonna pick whip all the way up to amount. So see, already now we got some sexiness here. We can control how much this shakes. Now we're gonna parent the majority of these things to that null. So we're gonna need the cracks, the wall, the ball, the shockwave, and the light to follow this null. So there we go. So right before the impact, I'm gonna keyframe this amount here to 0. And when it hits, I'm gonna make, I don't know, 30. And then quite a few frames later, I'm gonna say 0 again, because I wanted to just shake for a while and then stop shaking. And I want the times for it to do it to be maybe 12. And see, now you're gonna get this nice, now you're gonna get this nice camera shake as it hits, boom. And you can maybe make 2 of them actually if you want. So you can make one that is quite short like this. So really hard hit. We can maybe make the shockwave or the amount quite large, so 60 in pixels. So you get this really nice, maybe even more, maybe 200. So really get this drastic hit when it hits or when it lands. You can even have some extra residual shockwave later on. So you can duplicate this bad boy, press U and set it to quite lower, let's say 20. And just increase the time for it to stop shaking. And if we go 1 keyframe back, we parent the first camera shake to the second camera shake. So we get the nice first impact and then a nice slow impact afterwards. We can even make cracks in the wall so that it becomes even more obvious that it's breaking apart. So the shortcut is Control Y to create a new solid. And I'm gonna call this walls cracks. And I'm gonna make it comp size again. And maybe just do like some radio cracks, something like this that almost follows the ball. Think of like a spider web. Think of like a spider web that is following from the impact source. And now that we have some nice cracks going on, we can actually parent this to the original camera shake, something like this. And now we can just mask on these cracks as they happen. So if we just activate these and we just bring it over here where it starts, maybe make sure that they just start right there. We can even make them another color. So maybe Control Shift Y to modify an existing solid. So we can choose almost the same color as the blue there. There we go. And now we want them to reveal on as it hits. So if we go over here to the first frame, I'm going to press Q to choose the mask tool. I'm just going to draw a sphere, something like this. Control T to modify it. I'm gonna choose the center of the ball, something like this. And I'm gonna just play around with these settings here. Maybe expand it a smidge. Something like this. So we want the sphere to actually start from the beginning here. There we go. And then we're going to set this mask to intersect, which means that the masks below it will only appear if they're overlapping that mask. I'm going to press Ctrl-Shift-H to hide all the GUI elements. And I'm just going to decrease this size until we reach 0, or until we can't see the other masks. Something like this. Oops. I'm going to keyframe this, and then just 5 or 6 frames forward, I'm going to set it to 0. Actually increase it until we can see all the cracks. There we go. So the next part of Farty, God, that's a dumb name, is
Trails and streaks.
Because emphasizing the movement of something, like a trail following whatever is moving, really emphasizing both the direction and the movement and just the impact overall. So I'm going to create another little solid here, Control Y. I'm going to call this, let's just call it trail. Let's not make it too hard here. Make it quite bright, actually, because we really want to emphasize the movement of that ball. And we're going to set it actually below the ball, right here. Let's start drawing this. So let's find the point where the ball starts to hit the surface, which is about here someplace. So we're going to make a trail that follows basically that path. So I'm going to press G to bring up the pen tool. I'm going to make just a quick mask here, and I'm going to make it quite straight, something like this. We can even make it quite close, something like this, so that it starts at a certain place. So now we have this streak following the ball here at the end of the frame, but we also wanted to follow all the way from the beginning of this really fast animation. And we can see where it starts here, and I'm just going to make it easier for myself, and I'm going to press Ctrl R to bring up the ruler here. I'm just going to make some guidelines here so I can see where the ball starts. So something along these lines here. So now I can basically take the trail here and just follow it even more. Maybe it starts a little bit from there, just right before. And we can actually select these initial keyframes and make them follow the ball, so all the way up there. So we get these. So this is basically where the trail starts, something along these lines. So now we get this nice trail that follows. We can even take these original points up to where the original point started, so we get this nice trail. See, right now it's going a little bit too fast according to the ball, so you just adjust it until it matches the size of the ball in every frame. This is a little bit tedious, but it does the trick. Now here in the last few frames, we can actually just have it choke out real quick. So like 3 frames, you can expand the mask here, click on mask expansion and find the last frame and just decrease it until it basically disappears. Like right now it's a little bit too broad at the beginning, so you can always play with that. You can maybe make that the point where the guidelines connect is the actual origin point. So now we start to get some serious sexiness here. We really get that nice trail there at the end. And you can always hide the guide layers again just by clicking on the guide layers and taking them away, and then Control R. Or under view, you can actually choose whether to show guides or not. Now we're gonna be using the last letter in Farty, which is
Giraffe.
Impact
Flash.
You may have noticed in video games and anime, whenever something hits the screen, they actually either fill the entire screen with white or black or invert something and stuff like that. So we're gonna do the exact same thing here. And we're gonna do this quite easily by finding the ball here. There we go. We're gonna apply an effect called tint. There we go. And we're gonna set this tint to completely white, so the ball comes completely white. And we're going to keyframe this bad boy. So when it hits, it's going to be 100, and maybe 1 frame later, I'm going to press U, it's still 100. Then the frame right after, it's going to be completely 0, and the frame right before is going to be completely 0. So you just have that 1 frame where it flashes white. And we want to apply that to the rest as well. So we're going to copy this tint here. I'm going to place it on the wall, paste. But instead of white, we're going to make this black. So completely black, something like this. So already now we can see these nice cracks and stuff. We're gonna use this exact same tint here, copy, and we're gonna paste it onto all the wall cracks here. Paste all the wall paste, and on the wall cracks we actually want it to be white just as the ball. So copy the tint of the ball and paste it on wall cracks. So we get this nice inverted look for one frame. As you can see there, it really makes a difference. You really get that nice impact as it hits. Emphasize the impact based on how powerful it should be in your animation. And you can even do it on the background as well. As I can see here, it would give even more of an emphasis. I'm gonna press U on this crack here. I'm gonna copy it onto the background as well, so even the background becomes completely white as the ball hits. Really makes a very big difference. And you can really emphasize this a lot more with, say, particles and stuff like that. So the default particle system in After Effects isn't that great, but it should do the job for these type of things. So Control Y to bring up a new solid or create a new solid. Let's just call this particles. And we can maybe put this like behind the wall cracks. There we go. You can use different effects. You can either use particle world or particle system, but I'm actually going to use pixel poly in this case because it is mostly like geometric cracks, as you can see here. So I'm gonna use this bad boy. So right now you can see it just makes a bunch of triangles, and you can play around with this. You can make it like different type of polygons and all that stuff. And I'm gonna keyframe the force and the gravity and the spinning. There we go, so it's completely solid. I'm gonna hide this. And whenever the ball hits, I'm just gonna press Q to bring up the mask tool. I'm gonna make a little bit of a sphere here. And I'm gonna now keyframe this bad boy. So go to the first frame, keyframe all of these things, force, gravity, all that stuff. And when it hits, we're actually gonna generate this bad boy here. So we are increasing the force dramatically. Let's say 5. Let's see how that works. It's not doing anything. We're going to increase the force quite dramatically, something like 400 or something ridiculous, so we really get these pixel poly things here. We're going to increase the spinning by 1 or 2 or something. And we're going to match the same color as the ground, so you can just Control-Shift-Y to bring up the solid options again. Hit on the ground here, or maybe we can choose a little bit of a darker particle, something like this. Okay, so it just expands once it hits. I'm gonna set this to start whenever the impact starts, something like this. Now obviously I would recommend using a proper particle system for this, like a particular, which I can highly recommend. It would create much more interesting particles, but right now this is decent. You can always add like a simple choker or something. In a proper particle system or something, you'll be able to create streaks. But in this case, we can actually maybe apply an echo effect, something like this. Make it quite short in the distance, so we get like these streaks. We say maximum, and let's say decay 99, something like this, and maybe 20 copies. There we go. Maybe even making it a lot shorter, so 0,005. We get these nice streaks. We can even make it shorter still. And there you have it, 5 powerful animation techniques that you can use, and hopefully you can remember the really dumb acronym FARTY, because it is quite stupid. If you want to receive a mail whenever there are new templates, advanced templates, tools, presets, courses, etc., then I would recommend joining the newsletter. You can find the link in the description. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'm looking forward to see what you guys can create with these techniques. And if you're interested in other animation tutorials, I have one here on the left. Have a wonderful day with some cheese.